There aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to
be. Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the Rebel Alliance podcast. I'm your host, Aaron, and thank you for coming by today as I knock stuff over here on the desk. So it's been a minute since we've had any live videos or anything new lately, and let me just get you caught up before we dive into episode 59, I believe it is today, Unlocking the Secrets, Private Membership Associations, and Corpus Juris Sanctum Exposed. So, and we'll get into what all this is. So recently, if you guys have been following along online, the website had been hacked, I guess, or there was some funky code going on. And then the servers that we had, the East Coast PMA and the PMA Manifesto, a RAD driver went, I think that's what it's called. Anyways, it's pretty rad, bad joke. But so that RAD driver went down and the system was off whack, and I've got cords everywhere. I might have to go to like Bluetooth headsets or something. But anyways, so everything's been down. I started to migrate everything over to a server in the Netherlands just because they have better privacy out that way. And so it's taking a very long time. And then there's been some things going on here around the homestead and people being sick and surgeries and all that type of stuff. So it's been kind of hectic, and needless to say. And so anyways, I've got my cup of coffee. If you have one too, feel free to grab one, sit down and spend some time talking about associations. And, that's kind of where we are at right now. So hopefully this week things start to get back to a little bit of normalcy. Got some snow today here in Connecticut. We got walloped pretty good, about 12 to 14 inches. So I've got to go back out and do some more snow removal after this today and get caught up on a bunch of phone calls and emails for people that I am helping. So that being said, let's take care of some of the housekeeping before we get going here. As always, not as always, but right now, go to the YouTube channel, go to the Facebook group, go to the Telegram group if you got questions, if you want more information, if you want to connect with me. Right now, the website is still not working for East Coast PMA. However, one of the Angelas got back to me today or put out a message and signal, I should say, and said that the PMA Manifesto is up. We're going to be moving that site too, so it might be back down. But as of right now, if you are looking for more information and more content, you can always go over to the eastcoastpma.com if it's up. If not, hit the Telegram group and the Facebook group. Or you can go over to the pmamanifesto.com. And again, that's the ladies I work with over there, to Angela's and Erica, and we do stuff regarding associations over there. The PMA Manifesto's over there. If you're in the Facebook group for the PMA Manifesto, there's a discount code for you. So make sure you get over to that group too. Erica does admit people every Wednesday. So if you get in today with a request, you should be in the group by tomorrow. And that's a pretty active group for the most part. I don't know why my microphone keeps going in and out, but hopefully that's going to stop. So the other thing too, as always, if you are interested in taking back your computer sovereignty, like myself and others, or maybe you want to have end-to-end encrypted text messaging with your association members or your family and friends, head over to Start9, get one of their systems over there. And if you use the code Rebel Alliance at checkout, you get 9% off. I know some of you have already used that code, so hopefully it's helped keep a little more money in your pocket, but they are amazing systems. And however, if you are a DIYer type person, you can download the code right from their website and install it on your own computer or server and do it all kind of yourself. So that being said, I'm going to turn the chat on here so I can see your comments. If you got any, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Let me know where you're from, where you're watching from. I always find that interesting. And I'm here in Connecticut, and like I said, it's just stopped snowing. So got to get a fire going pretty soon. But first, a little coffee before we jump into today's topic. So Corpus Juris Sanctum is something I've been diving into. It's kind of like American jurisprudence. And I get it through Westlaw. So I've been going through and looking at associations, and something else I've been kind of digging into lately, which I think is going to help a lot of people out because a lot of people are like, well, I want to run my business in an association, and associations really aren't structured for straight up commerce. However, a lot of people don't want to, get an anonymous LLC, and they don't want to be registered. I don't have it in front of me now. That whatever that new federal act is, you have to have it at the end of the year, which is just a redundancy of what's at the state level. So it's kind of stupid. Some people want to use unincorporated business trust, but there are unincorporated businesses, and we're going to dive into that later this week. And I think by using the unincorporated business and the unincorporated association, or the private membership association, as they are so-called referred to online as the sexy term, I think this is going to help a lot of people kind of circumvent all that red tape and all the typical tyrannical government overreach that we see consistently everywhere. I did have some news stuff that I wanted to cover real quick beforehand, but I don't have it up right now. So we're just going to kind of skip over that. It had to do with a lot of this immigration stuff that's going on with all these illegals coming over and, getting set up in these camps and all this other stuff. It's just, it's just crazy how these towns, I think, right up the road from us here, we're kind of in, if you don't know where Connecticut is, we're the Constitution state. We're in between Massachusetts and New York. So we're kind of like a throughway a throughway state rather. But that being said, right up the road in Boston, they are now telling Bostonians that they need to house these illegal immigrants in their own home and outside of Boston. And so to open up their homes, which I think is absolutely crazy, that we're doing this and we're just letting our country become a third world country. But that being said, let's jump into today's topic, and feel free to share this live stream right now with anybody that you might know that might be interested in listening to what we got going on today. So Corpus Juris Sanctum is an encyclopedia of United States law at the federal and state levels. It is arranged alphabetically, kind of like American jurisprudence, so all the way from A to Z. It has over 430 topics that it discusses, which in turn are arranged into subheadings. As of 2010, CJS consists of 164 bound volumes, 5 index volumes, and 11 table of case volumes. So I find this interesting because what's nice about this is that when you start looking at this stuff, and I'm going to make this available either on the website once it's up, or in the Facebook group, or even in Telegram. I'll probably upload some stuff there. But all this stuff, you can read it yourself. So it's backed by actual factual law, and it's not just what some crazy person made up online, which we see a lot in the patriot movement, or freedom movement, whatever you want to call it. But it also cites using blue book format, which is how legalese are cited through cases and stuff like that in writing. So the blue book format cites all the different cases that it's referring to when it's discussing everything that's in this. And it's like it said, it's 430 topics. It's pretty big. And, if you go to your local law library, like I always tell you to, you can find not only the American jurisprudence there, but you can probably find this also. And again, as of 2010, it consists of 164 bound volumes, which is kind of crazy. So we're going to look at today definitions, no existence of association separate from members, because we get a lot of questions on that, for profit or not for profit associations, organizations and formations of associations, governance of associations generally, judicial review of associations administration, enforceability of association rules as a contract. Let's see what else we hear. Rights, powers, and liabilities of associations in general, and interpretation and construction of association rules. So these are some of the things we're going to look at today. And again, everything I try to do here on this channel is to be backed up by actual documents that you can read, and I'm not trying to just pull certain parts of cases like you'll see others do, where they try to make it one-sided. I give you the good and the bad here, just like we do over at the PMA Manifesto. We're very transparent over there also. So, and again, we have our monthly call. So if you missed that this month, we will be having it shortly. So the first thing I wanted to dive into is, and this isn't in the outline that I just went through, but this is from Northern Illinois University Law Review from spring of 2022. And basically it's talking about the fundamental rights of the First Amendment and principles. And so, we have about, the protest, freedom of the citizens to, grievance against the government, right to not to talk, to speak, not to speak. And it goes into also protections. Also, that the First Amendment also protects freedom of association. So I'll put this in the Telegram group. You know what? I can't do it right now while I'm on live, but what I will do is we'll do it afterwards. I'll put it in the Telegram group, Facebook group for all of you that are on here, and it's actually just got a little section that goes into, again, what we've talked about before with the NAACP and Alabama, and how the courts have identified through the Constitution and the First Amendment the right of association. So and how it's protected. So it's kind of a cool little piece that it talks about, and I'm going to put that up there just so you guys can all see it. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. Plus, there's some other great stuff in there if you want to know more about your First Amendment rights. So that being said, let me dive into this here. So association. So this is section 1 definitions of the Corpus Juris Sanctum. So the CJS, I'm going to call it JC for some reason, consistently probably today, but that's what we're going to go with, the CJS. And this was updated as of August 2023. So this is relevant new stuff for you all. And I think this is going to, it's going to help with some things. I'm going to highlight some stuff as I'm going through this. So when you guys get this later, you'll see some highlighted stuff. But the term association does not have in law a fixed meaning, such as accord to partnerships or corporations. So you hear the word association tossed around a lot, but it is used to indicate a collection of persons who have been united to join together for some special purpose or business. And we talk about that all the time, that an association is a group of individuals coming together for a common goal. And that's why I think that when we talk later on this week about the unincorporated business, that might be a way for for those who want to just run a business and maybe not have the whole association aspect of it, like maybe you have a farm or a homestead, or you sell eggs or whatever. That might be a way of doing it. So we'll dive into that more later. The term association may also refer only to unincorporated associations, and that comes out of, let me just scroll down to the case here, Smithfield votes for Republic Responsible Development Inc. versus Grisha, 2000. I think I said that properly. So the term association may refer only to unincorporated association. That's coming out of a court case. But regardless, the term is kicked around all over the place, and it's in a more broad sense. But when we're talking about associations for us, like we said, like it says here in the CJS, we're going to refer that as an unincorporated association. Now, I know online you hear a lot about PMAs or private membership associations, and that's, again, really kind of just the term that's kicked around online. The legal aspect of it, when you're talking to a CPA or an attorney or somebody from the state shows up and says, hey, you're operating an unlicensed childcare facility, you can't be like, well, we're a PMA, you have no standing here, because they're not going to know what you're talking about. You have to be like, no, we're an unincorporated association. We have certain rights that are protected by the Constitution, and this is how it works. And you need to explain it to them. So that being said, nevertheless, the word association is a broad term which may be used to indicate a wide assortment of different organizations, structures, including trust, depending on the context. So it goes on here to say that, again, association is a body of persons acting together without charter. Now, you've heard me talk about it before, where I tell you, you don't have to get our DIY templates. You don't have to hire me as a consultant to construct your documents. You can write them yourself. You can write them on a bar napkin, or you may not have any at all. It has to, and we'll see here in a second as we go through this today, but it talks about a mutual consent for a purpose of promoting a common enterprise or a common objective. So that is, in essence, when we're talking about associations, it's really important, in my opinion, to have these documents, because it's going to outline a lot of things and it's going to make things a lot easier for you to operate. However, legal, when we look at it legally here through the CJS, it doesn't say that we have to have those documents. So It also goes on to say that an unincorporated association is a voluntary group of persons without a charter formed by mutual consent for the purpose of promoting a common enterprise or common objective. And then it gives you the case for that. And I just want to scroll down and see what that is. And that comes out of Southern California Darts Association versus Zanfa. And that is from 2014. So again, what's nice about this is you hear a lot of people talk about associations, and they don't necessarily have access to the stuff unless they go down into the law library or they're in some type of furthering education to have a better understanding about law through a institution. So I went back to pursue my law degree, so I have access to certain things that the general person can't find unless they pay some serious money for through Westlaw, which I think they're like a few $100s per month or something like that. So this is something that you won't see, is that there are updated court cases that refer to the unincorporated association, and you'll see a lot of these other so-called experts, or not that I consider myself an expert, I just know enough probably to get myself in trouble, but these people that kind of peddle some of this mythology out there about PMAs, that they use stuff from like 1910 or 1820 or what have you, some of these older cases. And then they also go in to say under definitions that the word association can be synonymously used with company or society, and you'll see that in some court dealings where they talk about a society as opposed to an association. And so we have that. And then let's see, what else does I have to go on through here? I think that's pretty much it. It goes over a little bit about community associations, but that's it for definitions. And again, like I said, it's not my definition of what I think an association is. This is what legally, I guess, speaking is the best way to put this, that the courts will look at, or how it is interpreted through the Constitution. And I forgot my disclaimer because I haven't been doing this in a while. Please don't take any of this as legal or tax advice. Not that we're talking about taxes today, but do your own research. It's just one person's opinion on the topic. So that being said, let's move on to, and this is a good one that comes up a lot, that people have questions. And this is one that is kicked around a lot, that, if you have an association, nothing can happen to you. You can't be sued. You can't have this. You can't have that. They're looked at as a legal entity. And again, we're looking at this kind of at the broad aspect here. And when you get down to the state level, it changes. But this is, again, the CJS Association Section 2, no existence of association separate from its members. And what it goes into saying here is, generally, in the absence of statutes to the contrary, so if your state says, yes, an association can be looked at as a legal entity, if it doesn't, an association is not a legal entity separate from persons who compose of it, generally speaking. So again, when you hear this stuff online about associations, it's important to know whether they're talking generally or if they're talking specific for your state. So when I can talk to people on the phone or through email or video calls or what have you, smoke signals, not that we do that really, but my point is that I always ask, well, where are you calling from? Where are you looking to have this association? And then we get into the purpose and stuff like that, because it is going to change in each area. I have a couple people from Georgia. I have some people from Hawaii. I've got people from right here in Connecticut. I don't know why my chair keeps going back, but an unincorporated association as a judicial person distinct from its members does not come into existence or commence merely by virtue creation of the community of interest or the fact that a number of individuals have simply acted together. So again, just because you say you have an association, this is why I say it's important to have your founding documents, is, again, it doesn't mean you're going to be distinct. So you could, you could be in one of the states that sees an association as a legal entity, and you could then, say, oh, we're an association, but if you don't have the documents, the court, let's just say you're being challenged, might say, hey, well, you're not set up, and you're not what's the word I'm looking for, separate from the person, so it's not a legal entity. All right. And then as it goes through, let's see, There must also be an agreement whereby two or more persons combine certain attributes to create a separate entity for legitimate purposes. And this is why it's important to have your documents written properly so you can show no, look, here is the legal, the quote unquote legal existence, even though it's not on record anywhere. We've created our documents, we have our bylaws, our articles of organization. Maybe you have a membership agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, whatever it is that you have, a confidentiality agreement, and we are structured properly. We have presidents, we have vice presidents, we have, treasurers, secretaries, so on and so forth, and everything's laid out in your documents so they can say, okay, you're not just a bunch of people that got together and say you're an association, which you can do, but should there be some type of legal action, you want to give your members protection. And that's why, depending on where you are, also it's important, like I said earlier, that you know how at the state level, how associations are looked at. Let's see here. And this is where it says that legislators may recognize by statute a separate existence of associations, at least for certain purposes, as where there are statutes or rules of procedures providing that the association may sue or be sued. And this is why we say, again, it's important in your state to know whether you are considered a separate legal entity. And that is also why we tell people sometimes, either here or on the PMA manifesto, that it's important to maybe have, if you're looking for more liability protection, to have that anonymous LLC set up that handles all the money and the banking and that sort of part of it. And then you have your association in the background, which is an asset of that LLC. And that way there, the LLC would take the brunt of anything. And then this goes into a bunch of different cases. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else on here. I think that's it. Okay. The object of the contract of an association must necessarily be the creation of any entity whose personality is distinct from that of its members. Unless such intent exists, the parties do not create a fictitious person, but instead simply incur obligation of themselves. So again, it's one of those things where, and I don't want to get into the whole rabbit hole of fictitious person, but that's just their wording. So, like a LLC is a fictitious person, so to speak. It's not a living, breathing man or woman. So the association's kind of the same thing. And what you want to make sure you do is you separate that from its members. That way, they're your members or the trustees or whoever's running it are not on the hook for anything that should come out of that. So moving forward, now we're going to go to Section 3, for profit or not for profit associations. Again, we're still on the Corpus Juris Sanctum. So the JC. See, I did it again. The CJS. Sometimes that dyslexia just gets you. So, broadly speaking, there are two types or two classifications of association, one organized for profit and another organized for nonprofit. And this is where it's going to talk about the Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act that came out in the late 90s. There's been a revision to it. And this is also why it's important when you're speaking with either myself or the Angelas or Erica that, when we ask these questions, it's not that we're trying to be nosy. We're really trying to be able to the best way to advise you on setting up your association. So sometimes it makes sense for them to be a nonprofit. Sometimes it makes sense for them to be for profit. And again, it just depends on how you want to be structured or what your common goal is for your association. And again, that's why I think when we talk about the unincorporated business, you guys are going to be like, you know what, this could be really beneficial. Now we don't have to do all the LLC stuff and stuff like that. So, and then under the Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act, that is where you're going to find information for being organized as a nonprofit. So not every state has adopted that, most have, but that really kind of puts everybody on the same sheet of music. And it's snowing out again. Sorry, it was kind of like my squirrel moment there. So it'll allow you to understand how the state and the government will look at your nonprofit. So if you want to make sure you're operating properly, that would be the first place I would go to take a look at is the Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act. And I would tell you normally to go to East Coast PMA to download a copy of it. But as we all know, the website is still a dumpster fire. And it just goes into saying how it's been adapted in some jurisdictions. So a nonprofit association means an unincorporated organization other than one created by a trust consisting of two or more members joined by mutual consent for a common nonprofit purpose. So again, it gives us some definitions here. It gives us the reason or how it's to be looked at. And then it says, oh, they just pulled that out of the Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act, and they have a revised act. So, okay, that's where they're getting that from. They had a number 2, so I just wanted to take a look at the footnotes. And then an unincorporated nonprofit association means an unincorporated organization. Again, they kind of repeat it. Members joined under an agreement that is either oral or in record or implied from conduct of one or more common nonprofit purposes. So again, this is one of those sections where, or this key parts where, I tell everybody all the time, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but you don't need to have anything written. It can be oral, it can be implied, but to make sure there's no confusion on things, you really want to make sure that you are you have your documents written, right? So you want to either do them yourself or anything else, or like the DIY templates. Now, the term unincorporated association or an unincorporated nonprofit association does not include these following things. Let me just highlight this here because I'm going to forget. It does not include a trust, a marriage, domestic partnership, common law domestic relationship, civil union, or other domestic living arrangements, organization formed under any other statute that governs the organization and operates of an unincorporated association, a joint tenancy in common, or tenancy by entries, even if the co-owners share the use of a property for a nonprofit purpose, relationships under an agreement in a record that expressly provides that relationship between the parties does not create an unincorporated nonprofit association. So again, this is laying out, if you have a nonprofit association, what exactly that is and what it is not. So if you have a joint tenancy in common, that doesn't mean that you have a unincorporated association that is a nonprofit. Now, that nonprofit might hold property, but it's separate from all these other things. And again, this is where a lot of the details get lost with some of these other individuals that you'll see online or in podcasts and stuff like that. So it's very important that you get kind of, I don't want to say wrapped up around the axle on this stuff, but you want to make sure you keep everything pretty jelly tight when when it comes to your associations. That way if you're ever challenged, you can say, no, I'm not, we're not operating as a joint tenancy. We're a nonprofit, and the nonprofit unincorporated association actually owns the property and the members have benefits from that. So, when we talk about for-profit, the members of the association are treated as partnerships. And you've heard me say that time and time again. And I just want to, let's see, what are they referencing here? Number 4. So that is out of New Hampshire. And it looks like Shortledge versus Gus Gusky. I'm going to butcher that, but that's from 1984. You can, let me see. Can I just put that in the chat and you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about? I totally butchered that one, but let me see here if I can post this as a comment and you guys can see what this is, the one they're talking about. So when I talk about the an association, they use the term voluntary association, but an unincorporated association is structured for a profit. The members of that association are treated as partnerships. So whoever's running it is looked at as partners. So if there's any profit left over at the end of the year, then that would be divvied up that way. When a voluntary association is not organized for profit, the members are not viewed as partners and no agency is implied from mere fact of association. So again, if you're from a nonprofit, you're not looked at as partners, which is also very important. And let me see where else. Yeah, so that is for section 3. Now, we're going to move into, I'm trying to do this kind of quick, so coming up on 30 minutes already. This is organizations and formations of associations, and this is section 7. And associations are generally formed by the voluntary association of individuals under the common law right of contract, and the contract is embodied in an instrument termed articles of association or constitution, however you want to refer to it. When I write the documents, our DIY templates, it's usually referred to, no, it's always referred to as articles of association. So let's see, they go into the Revised Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act. And under the Revised Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act, which has been enacted in several jurisdictions, an unincorporated nonprofit association has perpetual duration unless the governing principles specify otherwise. So you may not have an association that lasts forever. You might say, we're going to have an association that's going to last for 90 days because we're doing something special, or maybe we want it to last, 100 years, whatever. That you can put that stuff in your bylaws. I don't necessarily put that in when I write them unless somebody specifically asks for it. But again, I think one of the things we talk about today is amending your bylaws and stuff like that, and you can do it whenever you want, which is great. We don't really care about homeowners associations because that really doesn't help us anywhere. All right, so that is the formation association duration. And it really doesn't go into telling us how long for a regular for-profit, we'll call it, association, or just a standard association, but it does specify that for a nonprofit you can select the uh, and have perpetual duration unless the governing principles specify otherwise. So that being said, let's get into governance of associations in general. And for those of you who are on, or if you watch the replay, please let me know if you have any questions, leave a comment. I know I have a ton of YouTube comments to get to. I'm going to try to do that tomorrow before tomorrow's live, if possible, just because, like I said earlier on in the beginning of the show, that we've been really backed up around here. So this is section 12 under the CJS. I got it right that time. Management and internal affairs of a voluntary association are governed by its constitutions and bylaws. And that is definitely something you've heard me say here before, that not, having those bylaws or the constitution for your association, your articles of organization, your bylaws, it really lays out, it's a few pages when I put them together, even through the DIY templates, you can add in more than what we give you for, what's the term I'm looking for examples. You can add more to it, you can take away, but you're not going to be able to cover everything, but you want to cover a broad range of different topics. That way there, if something comes up like a dispute, you can say, we have alternative dispute resolution, we have this, we have that. So so that comes out of let's see, Regency Homes Associations versus Shirt. That's from 2009. So that's another one that you can look up. And again, when you guys download these, when I make them available, you'll be able to check out all these court cases, read them yourself through like Case Mine, or what's the other one, Google Scholar. So voluntary associations have inherent power to regulate their affairs to attain objects for which they were constituted. All right. And then an association, being solely a creature of convenience between its members, has the power to adapt articles of association or constitution to enact such bylaws as the association may agree upon. So this is also why when we're talking with people, when we consult with them, that we say, okay, who else are you doing this with? Because, we need to have two or more, and making sure everybody has gotten their piece said, everybody understands what the bylaws are going to be, what's going to be in them, or the constitution as they put it here, which I think is kind of a cool way of putting it. So the only thing that they talk about here that really, you can put what you want in your association bylaws, is that if you are, again, doing something illegal, it's not going to cover you. You're going to be screwed, right? So if you are selling illegal narcotics out of your association, or you're running a prostitution ring, or anything like that, human trafficking, your association isn't going to cut it. All right. Now, I know there might be people that say, well, you got the Hells Angels and stuff like that. And, I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying, in general speaking, there are certain things you can do within an association that are legal, and there are things that are illegal. So, and it says in here, provided that they are not contrary to public policy or to law. And that comes out of Pinksker versus Pacific Coast Society of Orthodontists. That's an interesting one. That's from 1974. And they have some other ones in here. I think they have like 7 cases that they look at, everywhere from the 80s to the 40s. So when the rules and bylaws of a voluntary association or unincorporated association are reasonable, they become binding upon the association's members, while the rules and regulations of the association must not be arbitrary and unreasonable. So you can't have things like, hey, listen, if you want to join the association, you can only wear one-legged pants. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous, and nobody's going to want to do it. So they can't be arbitrary and unreasonable. It is recognized that the association has considerable latitude in rulemaking in order to accomplish its objectives. So as you see, we progress through these topics, that it's going to get into where the court is saying no, unless there's something really pressing within the association that's being done wrong, like somebody's rights are being violated, like maybe you're running a slave labor camp in your backyard and you got 8-year-olds, mucking out barns or something. I don't know. Think of something really crazy. Then the court will be like, yeah, no, wait a second. We have a reason to be, involved in all this. So that being said, I think that is also very important that, as you are running an association and setting this stuff up, that the ins and outs of how associations work and why this is so important. And, because you're going to have members that are going to ask, well, like, how does this work? If we have an association, where does our power come from? Well, how is it that we can have these bylaws or these constitutions, and what enforces that? And you can say, well, glad you've asked, Jimmy. Let me show you some case law here that supports this stuff. Not only do we have the First and 14th Amendment and a few others that we can throw in there, we also have these standing precedents that say this is how associations should operate and work. And I think that is huge when it comes to that stuff. So this is where I think this is the one here. So this is section 13, judicial review of associations administration. And then although a court, and it says here, and you'll see it in big bold letters, although courts will not interfere to control the administration of a constitution and bylaws of an association or enforce rights springing therefrom, such organizations may seek enforcement of their rules in a civil courts if a particular dispute involves property rights or otherwise judicial considerability. So that is something that is important also to understand. Like, none of us want to go to court, right? We don't want to point that gun at somebody. We want to, handle things ourselves. And that's why when I write my documents, for people, I put in alternative dispute resolution, or, having a tribunal or some type of governing office within the association that can hear complaints and put things to a vote, and that sort of thing. Because the last thing we want to do is rely on some third party, unless you absolutely have to, just like, I don't understand why people call the cops on their neighbor. Like, I don't have neighbors real close by, but, in like more urban environments, you have, like, oh, your grass is too long, so I'm calling the enforcement. Instead of just go knocking on your neighbor's door and be like, hey, dude, do you mind cutting your lawn or getting that car off blocks? Nobody in the neighborhood likes to see it. Maybe they just need a hand, but we're so quick to point people at others. And, I think it's kind of like pointing a loaded gun, whether you're bringing somebody to court or calling the police on them and that sort of thing. So anyways, getting get off topic here. Again, and it says that, they're not going to, the court's not going to come in unless, one, the association seeks it for some type of judicial reasoning or something within the civil courts. And then that comes out of Edwards versus Indiana State Teachers Association from 2021. When you look at that footnote, and then a court may intercede to void the actions of a private association only when there is action plainly where am I? I lost my spot. If it goes against the bylaws or ambiguous against the bylaws, when a private voluntary organization plainly violates the terms of the bylaws, the issue of whether and to what extent judicial relief will be available depends on the balancing the interest in protection of the aggrieved parties' rights against one infringement on the organization's autonomy and the burden on the courts that will resort from judicial attempts to settle such internal disputes. And again, that comes out of California Dental Association versus American Dental Association. And basically what they're saying is that, unless there's something that is contrary to the bylaws or that is really ambiguous, in the bylaws. Like the bylaws really aren't clear, and this is why I say it's important to have really clear bylaws and articles of organization. Because if they have to go in and interpret it, that may not really be the best thing. So, again, um, yeah. So if you're looking to, I'm just trying to highlight some stuff here for you all when you guys download this. If you're looking to, enforce anything, yes, you could go to court if you wanted to. I don't think it's the best remedy for things because it says that the courts will not interfere with the administration of the Constitution of bylaws of the association unless there is something that has to do with like things civil rights, property rights, or something that falls within that judicial venue. So, enforceability of association rules and contracts. And again, these are some of the things that people ask, like, well, how does this stuff become enforceable, or how do we enforce it, and so on and so forth. And this is why I'm kind of going through this today, because I think it's important that as you run an association, if you join an association, you understand the precedence that has been set through these court cases and constitutional rights, and how, you know, things within the association rules, bylaws, that sort of thing are enforced. Because maybe you have that one bad actor within your association. You're like, yeah, no, we need to handle this. So the Constitution, bylaws, and regulations of an association constitute a contract which the courts will enforce both as between the members themselves and as between the association on one side and the individual member on the other, and the rights and powers and duties and liabilities are measured accordingly. So that comes out of, let me see here, Constitution, bylaws, regular association, enforceable agreement. Yep. So it says here the Constitution, bylaws, whatever you'd like to call them, and regulations of the association create a legal enforceable agreement. So that's another thing too. When you have people signing up your membership agreement, they need to understand this is a legally binding contract. They're joining your association. They're saying they're not going to break these rules, and if they do, here are the consequences. In the nature of a contract between an organization and the member, and that comes out of Pollock versus Chesterview County Club Association. That's from 2009. And this is what I love about this stuff. It was updated in 2023. So instead of relying on some of these older court cases, not that they don't matter because they still have standing, I always get asked the questions, well, is there anything that's newer? Do you have any newer court cases? And that's my person asking me question voices. And I say, yeah, no, here you go. Here's something that's really, 2009. It's not right around the corner or not that far behind us, but it's not from 1910 either. So it makes sense. Let's see, because of corresponding mutual obligations by the members to follow the rules of the organization and by the organization to fairly apply the rules. So again, a lot of this stuff you'll see when we're going through it, it says mutual obligation, common goal, coming together for a common reason or to achieve something. And, you can't have an association that you try to run as a dictatorship. They really embody our republic as, the United States of America and our Constitution, because it's allowing us to self-govern with other individuals. We can set up our own constitutions or bylaws or rules, and we can act as a republic. It's like a micro republic within the bigger republic, I guess is the best way of looking at it, right? The Constitution and contracts, which the courts will enforce both as between the members themselves and between the associations. We kind of went through all that already. And the rights and powers and duties and liabilities measured accordingly. And that comes out of Indiana High School Athletic Association versus Carlbridge by Carlbridge or Carlberg. Let's see. The relationship of a voluntary association with its members is governed by contract law and makes no difference whether the articles of association are called a constitution, charter, bylaws, or any other name. And I think that is definitely probably one of the best lines out of this whole thing. Well, one of the best lines, because I get asked, well, hey, I don't have bylaws, I have a constitution, or I have this, or it really doesn't matter what they're called. Your documents, and that's why I try to refer to them as founding documents. Whatever you set up as your founding documents, whether you had myself do them, you had the Angelas or Erica do it. Maybe you got them from some other person that's probably going to be trash. Not that I want to sling mud, but some of the ones I've seen and some of the people that I've been helping lately have gotten these from other larger groups that have a presence on social media and Facebook, which we were all removed from because we were kind of bringing the truth to the table, that, you really want to have these documents reviewed, making sure that they are written properly. And, I've been doing that, a lot of that lately also for some individuals, but it's, the best part is to understand that regardless of what you're calling them, everything is governed by contract law. And if you really want to know more in depth about contract law, I'll probably make this the item of the day or month, whatever I was doing, week, item of the week. Because I've been trying not to say lately either. So the item of the week is going to be contract law for everyone, from the what is it called? The uh, law. I can't think of it now. Law for Everyone guide. You can find it on Amazon if you want. I will put a link for it somewhere and all this stuff. But they have different ones like constitutional law for everyone. They have, criminal law for everyone, and their contract law for everyone. It's a short listen to if you're going to listen to it through Audibles. It's a fairly easy read. You can get the DVD too, where it has, different professors and law individuals coming up and talking about contract law. And one of the things that, I don't think a lot of people realize, and you can even do this with your association, you can have what is called a boilerplate contract. And that's basically, we see them all day long. We always click on them without reading them. Like, you agree to the terms and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yep, click, let me in. I don't really care. I just need to get to whatever site. And you can use that within your association and it will stand up, because the idea is that person of sound mind and age would have taken the time to read the actual contract. I don't think that really happens. But anyways, and then any disputes between the association and one of its members concerning the vitality of the association's constitution, bylaws, rules, and regulations constitute a dispute as to the vitality of the written contract. The association private rules are generally binding on those who wish to remain members. So, yeah, you could have a dispute about whether it's what's in them is legal. That way, I haven't seen that a lot, and that's why I think in the past, last section 12 we were just in, talks about ambiguous, parts of your contract or your bylaws. You want to make sure things are very detailed, so there is no ambiguity to anything that you are doing. So we only have a few more. I'm going to try to do this within under an hour, folks. If not, I might have to do a part 2 tomorrow. This is section 15, amendments or repeal of association rules. And this is kind of where it starts talking about being able to change things, if I remember correctly, and that might be the next section. So no, this is it. So in order to be effective, an amendment or repeal of the Constitution or bylaws must be regularly made in manner provided by the organic law of the association. An association has the power to amend its articles of association, constitution, in the mode prescribed, right? So you need to have this stuff in your association documents. Like, okay, if we want to make an amendment, how many do we have to have for a vote? Who has to bring up the amendment? Can it be brought up at a regular meeting, or does it have to be a special meeting? These are all the different things. Ordinarily, and this is also important here, that ordinarily the bylaws of an association may be amended or repealed at any time at the will of its members. So, again, if your bylaws are written that, hey, any member can bring up a motion to change said bylaws, then you have that in there. If it's maybe the member can bring it up to the trustees, and then the trustees vote on whether it needs to be done or not, or the president, vice president, whatever you're going to call yourselves, then that might be another way of doing it. Again, provided that the amendment is not unreasonable or oppressive. And they have court cases in here that's cited. Let's see if this. I'm always kind of nervous to see what the case says. Skane versus Star Valley Ranch Association. That's from 1992, Wyoming. It looks like. So again, there's all these protections in place, when you're setting up your association. So if you have a member that says, hey, I want to change this to, every meeting we have to wear blue pants on backwards with one leg and Crocs. Well, that might not be something that's reasonable. So it's not going to be changed, right? So it allows you, again, to self-govern, to have that self-custody of your association and how you're doing things. So, Let's see here. A member of the voluntary association is bounded by amendments to the association rules. So, as long as the amendments are duly enacted and do not deprive a member of vested property rights without the member explicit consent. Again, I always tell everybody, when you're doing your amendments, put them in your minutes of your meeting, add them to your documents, and you can just have it titled amendment, and then amendment 1, amendment 2, whatever it is that you're changing. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. It says in here that needs to be done by a quorum or majority vote of those who are present. I think when I do mine, it's a 2/3 vote. Uh, and that is it for amending them. So it is important that, it is, let's see. Oh, and this is the other thing too. So not only is it unreasonable or oppressive, if it's unreasonable or oppressive, they don't need to be changed, is not inconsistent with the fundamental scheme of the association and does not destroy vested rights. So again, if you have, I don't know, maybe you have a uh, no kill shelter that's running as an association, you're teaching people how to house animals and keep them from, being euthanized. And then somebody comes and said, hey, on the first Tuesday of every month, we're going to euthanize 3 rabbits. So then maybe that isn't an amendment that you want to have in there. Kind of being a little ridiculous here, but I'm just trying to get the point across. So that's when it comes to amending your articles of association, your constitution, your bylaws, whatever you'd like to call them. Again, the greatest thing about this is, as long as you're not doing anything that's illegal or, as they say, oppressive in here, or unreasonable, you can make these changes within your association. That is what is so great about associations. You don't need to be like, oh, Aaron said 2/3 vote. You could have a 1/3 vote that's possible, or and there has to be at least 10 members and the majority rules, however you want to do it. So if you're voting on something, maybe it's, hey, we have to have a members meeting, there has to be at least 10 members at the meeting, and some of the key positions have to be there, like the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and then other members to make up the 10. But so yeah, so that is section 15, amendment or repeal of association rules. My eye's starting to bother me here. And again, that's under Corpus Juris Sanctum, CJS section 15. And then I think we're getting near the end here. Yeah, we have interpretation of, let's see, what do we got here? Interpretation and construction of association rules. And then we will end here with association section 71, rights, powers, and liabilities of associations in general. So the interpretation and construction of association rules. The Constitution and bylaws of an association are constructed according to the general rule of contracts. Courts recognize an association rights to interpret its constitution, bylaws, and rules, and courts cannot substitute their judgment for that of the association in making and interpreting its rules, so long the interpretation is fair and reasonable. And this is very important when you start creating your documents or you start changing them, as we just talked about, amending them in the past section, is that you want to make sure that the association and its members have an understanding of how the laws or the constitution or bylaws are written for that association, and that if there's anything that comes up where somebody doesn't feel that it's correct, there's a way to amend them. And it says here that any dispute between a association and one of its members concerning the constitution of the association, bylaws, rules, regulations, constitutes a dispute as to the construction of written contract, and the constitution and bylaws of the association, much like corporation articles and bylaws, are construed according to the general rules of contract. So maybe this is something we'll dive into, as the general rules of contract, where we can see that, as you're writing your association documents, you want to make sure that you fall under the general rules of contracts. And then it talks about the courts recognize the association rights to interpret the constitution, bylaws, and rules, and that comes out of court case Berkey versus Tri Realtors, and that is out of 1989. So, oh, hey, Frozen Dog, thanks for coming in from Missouri, right? Or is it Montana? I can never remember. Missouri. I think it's Missouri. I'm all screwed up right now with my states, because I know you put MO on there and it's really bugging me that I don't know what it is off the top of my head. And I can't believe I just said that live on air. But anyways, Thank you for coming. It's been a long day, and this is longer than my normal podcast, and my brain's starting to be turn into mush here. And again, it talks about how the courts cannot substitute the judgment for the association in making interpretation of the rules, and that comes out of court case Brotherhood's Relief and Compensation Fund versus Rafferty, and that is from 2011. And it looks like it's out of Alabama Civil Court. Let's see. I'm looking at, okay, so this is one thing that says, however, the inclination of the courts to sustain the interpretation of the association cannot be extended to put the court's power at the association's mercy. And in a proper case, the courts may construe and fix the meaning of the articles or constitution and the bylaws. So the courts will interfere when the association rules are interpreted in an unreasonable and arbitrary manner, not in good faith or in violation of the law of the land. And we all know the law of the land is the Constitution. So again, you can have your association documents, you can set them up how you want, but if you are in violation of the law of the land, the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, or you are just doing something that's not in good faith, where you say, hey, every member has to provide 10 shillings, I don't know, whatever it is, at each meeting, and it's not in good faith of the association, or it's not being used for the association, or it's just something that's very arbitrary, then the courts can come in and say, no, we need to fix your bylaws, your constitution, your articles of organization. And that is why it's important that when you write them, you really take the time, because the last thing we want to do is have any third party coming into our private association, our unincorporated association, and telling us that we have to do something else. And that's also why please, if you don't listen to anything else I say today, take the time to either schedule a time with myself, the Angelas, Erica, and talk to us before you start spending money. I've talked to people this past few weeks that have spent thousands of dollars on documents that can be used to start a fire. They're garbage. And because they are just carbon copies of all this other garbage that's being pushed out there, people are unfortunately being taken advantage of, because they're looking for a way to do things better, to be more self-governing, to have that self-custody, whatever you'd like to call it. And they're spending their money, and it's getting wasted with these other hacks, because all they're doing is taking the documents that somebody else created a long time ago, or maybe they're mushing some crap together and they really don't know what they're doing. And they're selling stuff for anywhere between, let's call it $3,500 and up. And it's really just kindling for your fire, basically. All right. So let's see. In fact, the courts may take its own interpretation of the controversial provision of the association's bylaws where there is a dispute over matters of fundamental rights. So again, we can't violate anybody's rights, even if we are in a private association. And I am not going to do this under an hour, but hey, listen, this is a long one today. We've covered a lot in this. I'm going to break it up into some smaller content for you all to digest. But this last one is section 71. And again, this is out of the Corpus Juris Sanctum, the CJS, updated in 2023. So for all of you that get the downloads, when you start downloading stuff, you will see that a lot of the court cases are newer court cases, which is good. Because not only can we rely on the older court cases that are still standing, but now we can also rely on these newer ones. And I need a little bit more coffee. So the right, power, and liabilities of an association may be governed by statutes and the provisions of its articles of association or bylaws, and include incidental powers reasonably designed or regarded to give fuller or greater effect to the express powers. And I think we're going to have to dive into express powers and some other things. This is kind of good. I'm getting some different content out of here that we can start diving into. So the rights, powers, and liabilities of an association may be governed by statutes and the provisions of articles of association or bylaws. An association has a great discretion when conducting its internal affairs, especially when its conduct relates to the interpretation and enforcement of rules and regulations. So again, let's see. So the rights, powers, and liabilities of association governed by statutes or bylaws, whatever you'd like to call them, that comes out of, this is a long one, International Motorist Associations versus Aguilera out of Texas, 1966. I really got to get better at reading some of these court cases. I got to read them ahead of time because some of the last names kill you. Let's see here. An association without articles, constitutions. All right. So this is important for all of you that have an association that does not have articles or a constitution or bylaws or anything like that. So listen up here. An association without articles, constitutions, or adapted rules is governed by common parliamentary rules as respects the regular of its meaning and subject to certain restrictions, can make changes in its governing rules that will at any meeting duly held. My eye is really starting to bother me now. So hopefully I can get through this. I kind of like the floaters, and hopefully after the end of April, my left eye will be fixed. The powers of an association may also be determined by usage acquired in its members. Therefore, as a general rule, association being solely a creature of convenience between its members, no checks exist upon the right to transact its business in such manner as it may agree upon, so long as it does not act illegally or contrary to public policy, and the regulatory of the proceedings is presumed in the absence of showing to the contrary. An association possesses not only the powers which they expressly confer upon it by its charters, franchises, or articles of association, but also all incidental powers reasonably designed to require to give fuller or greater effect to the expressed powers, and has the right to preserve its existence as long as its functions survive. So that's a pretty big paragraph there. And basically, it's just saying, you don't need to have the checks and balances, but as long as you're not, again, as long as you're not doing anything illegally or contrary to public policy, your transactions in business, uh your what's the word I want to look for? I want to use here your interactions with your members, as long as none of that stuff is illegal or contrary to public policy, you have the powers within your association to write all that stuff into your documents. And the powers which are expressly conferred upon it by its charters, franchise, articles of organization. So this is why, again, with your articles and your bylaws, you want to make sure things are written in there. So whether it I really don't have any examples for that. I'll have to work on that. Let me see here. The association has the right to promote its aims and purpose and advance its members' best interests by all legitimate and legal means. So as long as no definite legal right of others is violated. So I would tie this into when I get questions about how do we advertise for our association? Can we put a Facebook ad on there for our association to bring more people in to get our free range Easter egg or eggs because they're beautiful colors? And this tells you right here that the association has the right to promote its aims and purposes and advance its members' best interest by all legitimate and legal means. So if you have an association and you want to help others understand how to raise chickens and how to raise chickens and how to, store the eggs and everything that comes along with it, then yeah, you could run a Facebook ad for your association because it's gonna advance the members in the best interest of them when they join, and it aims at the purpose of the association. So if your reason for association is raising chickens, maybe in an urban backyard where you're not supposed to have chickens, and you do it on the DL and you want to teach others how to do it where their neighbors aren't going to bitch and moan, well, then you can do that as long as it doesn't violate the rights of others. And again, this talks about a section for those of you who do not have articles. An association without articles or a constitution or bylaws may adopt any lawful meaning to accomplish its objective, but it cannot adapt any measure subversive of the objectives for which the association was formed or do illegal acts. So again, even if you don't have a constitution or bylaws, you still can't do things illegally, but you can adopt lawful means to accomplish an objective. So keep that in mind. Let's see here. Oh, this is where they talk about the legal entity, powers of a legal entity. So, where an unincorporated association exercises the rights and powers of a legal entity, it should, to the extent reasonably and legally possible, be held to assume corresponding duties and obligations. The failure of an association to afford procedural safeguards may result in the where am I, in the position of liability for damages regardless of the presence or absence of substantive basis for action. So again, an unincorporated association, if you are acting as a legal entity, if you're allowed, if it's recognized in your state, because as we talked earlier, you know, broad view of the unincorporated associations aren't separate from its members unless there's a statute within your state that says that it is acting as a legal entity. That, you know, if you are if if you're in the imposition of a liability or damages regardless of the presence or absence of an action, you want to make sure that you have that you're not failing. I don't know how the best way to put this. I probably should start with this one first. This one's been a long one. The failure of an association to afford procedural safeguards. So you got to make sure you have things in place within your documents to provide that that safeguard to your members, especially if you're like if you're renting something and you have no liability insurance or like an umbrella policy and something happens to the building. Now you have caused a, I'll call it a trespass to that building owner who has rights to own that property and to make money from it. And now you've done something careless. Let's say you burnt it down. And yes, they should have insurance on it, but you should also have your own insurance policy. And again, that's not necessarily for you and your members, it's for outside places if you're renting and stuff like that. Let's see here. Revision. I'm not going to get into the Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act right now. Maybe we'll do another video on that. But that was 17. So that is the rights, powers, and liabilities of associations in general. So we've got 3 on. We had, I think, like 4 or 5 was max. Today we're at an hour. Before we end, does anybody who is on right now have any questions or uh, concerns or anything regarding associations? I know we covered a lot of stuff today. You know, let me see if I can bring up my show notes here. So we covered definitions, no existence of association, separation from its members, for profit, not for profit associations, organizations and formations of associations, governance of associations generally, judicial review of associations, enforceability of association rules and contracts. And that's we started talking a little bit more about, you know, contract law, interpretations and constructions of association rules, and rights, powers, and liabilities of associations in generally. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to stay with me today. This was a lot, and a lot of this is stuff that I really didn't want to regurgitate and kind of give you my perspective on it. I really wanted to make sure that, you know, word for word, as long as my eyes hold up here, that, you know, we went over this stuff, because I think a lot of this stuff really becomes important when you're running an association, you know, and you have a member that's not acting properly. Well, now you can say, you know, here is how we enforceably, you know, enforce our rules. Enforceably enforce the rules. Now that doesn't make any sense. Here is how we enforce our rules within our association, and you can bring this to your members, whoever's running the association with you, and say, here we go. Here is something from the Corpus Juris Sanctum. You know, it was updated in 2023. Here's section 14. It talks about enforceability of association rules as a contract. And now we have this member who isn't acting properly. How do we handle it? And this will kind of tell you where you can get your power, I guess, for lack of a better description, to enforce those said rules. So I think a lot of this stuff isn't being covered by a lot of the other individuals who push associations. I think a lot of them aren't doing associations justice, to be quite honest with you. And there are, you know, there are some important, you know, nuggets of golden here, I guess is the best way to put it, when it comes to running your associations. And so that's why today was a little bit longer, but I am really trying to get this information out to you. I do apologize for the last week of not having any videos. We'll be back again tomorrow talking about some other stuff. And then later on this week, we'll be talking, well, tomorrow is Wednesday, right? So maybe tomorrow we'll talk about unincorporated businesses. But I really think that, going forward, if you are looking to have an association, please reach out to one of us, either myself or anybody at the PMA Manifesto. I believe that site is back up and running. So you can go over there. You can go over, I think it's Meet the Team, and then you can see a picture of all of us. There's a link to schedule a time to talk to any one of us. And then we can hopefully help answer any questions you might have that one-on-one time and really guide you in the direction that you probably should go in, or we think is probably the best avenue for you. Again, like I tell everybody, you're always driving the bus. I'm just showing you a couple different roads to go down. Whichever one you choose is up to you. But I think, the more this information gets out there, the more people understand actually where their rights come from when it comes to associations, or just rights in general, and how they can, like I said earlier, have their own little republic where they're self-governing, they're taking care of their community. They're almost like their own little planet within the United States here, or wherever you're watching from, that it just allows you to live a more free life. Personally, that's how I see it. That's why I like it. I like that self-governing. I like that self-custody. That's why I like Bitcoin. That's why I like my Star9 server. All those different things. I just want to live a life with a leaner, less intrusive government. And if I can do that within the world of associations by getting them set up and working with other, people that have the same viewpoints or the same goals in mind, we're not even necessarily the same viewpoints, same goals, I probably think is the best way of putting it. That is a huge win for me, because, now not only have we, taken what our forefathers had put together to create this country, we're now using it at the micro level to self-govern and say, hey, we have our own community here now. We're going to help each other out. We're going to take care of things. We're going to learn how to be more self-sufficient, or whatever it is your reason of association is. But again, remember, like we talked about today, you can have them for profit, you can have them for nonprofit. Can conduct business within your association. And if you don't want to run a full-blown association, then stay tuned tomorrow. If I can get everything together, we will talk about unincorporated businesses. And I think that's gonna be kind of the tipping point for a lot of people to say, hey, you know what, I was on the fence for an association, but the unincorporated business seems like a better way to go. And again, we'll talk about any drawbacks or anything like that. Also, it's not a silver bullet. It's just, another tool in the tool shed, toolbox, tool belt, whatever you want to call it. Just a lot of tools, and we just need to know how to use them all. So, not seeing any questions from anybody, I'm going to pop into the Facebook group really quick, because I know we're streaming live over there, and I just want to see if there are any questions over there today. Oh, I got to refresh the screen. That would help, so I can see what's going on over there. But no questions over there either. So that being said, thank you all for coming by and checking out today's episode. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Again, if you watch the replay, please let me know where you're watching from. Let me know if you have any questions. And I do promise next day or two, I will get to all of the YouTube questions, and maybe tomorrow we'll just answer some of those live on air. So thanks again for watching. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Peace.
All over the country, maybe there will be.
People need to start